So hello and welcome. This is my 15 minutes of fame, and it's time for me to be the prophet of doom, or perhaps the visionary oracle of a bright future. I'm here to give you my spin on the future of data collection. But before we take a leap into 2050, I'm going to start with the here and now. So why is it chatbots? What is the overall relevance here? Well, this is a famous scene with the HAL 9000, one of the protagonists in Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is the onboard computer of the spaceship Discovery 1. As its artificial intelligence begins to malfunction, it tries to kill the crew of the spaceship. This is the scene where the computer tells the astronaut Dave Bowman that it doesn't obey him anymore. The film was released exactly 50 years ago in 1968, and it illustrates just how science fiction authors imagined the human-machine interaction. In basically every science fiction movie, humans just talk with machines. It's very rare that they use keyboards or mouses to interact with them. To learn our language instead of us having to learn theirs. What if there were no special media skills required to interact with a computer? So it turns out we're pretty much there. Possibly we have some of these human-centric interfaces already. Alexa and Siri are just an example of this. And if anyone's seen the latest Google booking a haircut video, we are very much progressing. We'll get fewer and fewer interactions that involve keyboards, mouses, or touchscreen interactions in the future. But first of all, where are we now? Any of you that have been with me on this journey for the last few years will know. Online surveys, the method is already 20 years old. Mobile surveys, even though it's a standard today, the first iPhone was only released in 2007. It took a while for it to become as relevant as it is now, but the history of mobile research is still rather young. We also have quick reply chatbot surveys. They have not yet become mainstream, but they are a logical step between surveys and chatbot interfaces. And I'm going to show you one example. So this is an example for a quick reply chatbot. As you can see, the answer options are given. There's no possibility to give open-ended feedback. It's basically a standard survey with filters and discrete variables, very nicely wrapped into a chat interface. But we have two more steps in the chatbot journey. The first of those is rule-based chatbots. This is the technology that we used in our study, and we're going to explain this in a second. And finally, and this is a bit of a contentious point internally, but there is AI chatbot surveys. This potentially will be the future. This is once it works, well, we can plug in text to voice and voice to text and make the interface even more natural than it is now. So what does rule-based actually mean? The chatbots that we use at the moment are rule-based. This means that they detect keywords or key expressions and it throws a corresponding reaction to the user. If no response is found, the chatbot gives a default message. Admittedly, it's not very sophisticated from a technical standpoint, but it has a huge advantage with regards to methodology. Because our chatbot's reactions are already determined, it allows you to conduct a controlled experiment by alternating the reactions. Every beginning is hard. This is very true. As you can see from this example, it has been a learning experience. The chatbot is only as good as you've programmed it to be. This is an example of one of our very first chats before we made any improvements to it. So we told the respondents it would be a test, it's a new technology, and they should be friendly. As you can see, our chatbot failed to understand simple expressions like I don't know or no, and it freaked the users out a little bit. It then asked closed questions, can you explain this to me, when no is a completely legitimate answer. Yeah, I'm not allowed to swear, go away. It got a little bit upset. So, learning from all these conversations, we wondered what difference it would make to react differently to user feedback. Those of us involved in offline methodologies are well versed in the issues such as interviewer bias. What would happen if we tweaked our new interviewer a little bit? So this is the research question we had in mind. How is data quality affected by the attitude and tonality of a chatbot? Would humans even interact with a robot? Should the robot sound neutral, technical, friendly? Can it be critical? So we tried to measure an interviewer effect in a very controlled manner. And this was our setup. We did it on the UK panel with 4 nomads. So it looks a little bit like WhatsApp, as you can see. So we alternated the tonality by randomly adding affirmative statements to the dialogue tree. In this example, we used definitely. We also created a critical chatbot. that put the respondent statements into question. For example, many people would see that differently. And finally, we had a control group that just had the standard open text box answer. Just one word about the duration of the chat. Obviously, as the chatbot can't tell when things are finished, we displayed a next button below the chat and asked respondents to continue once the conversation becomes repetitive or feels like a dead end. So the respondents could write as much or as little as they wished. So let's have a look at the results. We've counted the words, the characters, and the interactions by respondent only without considering the input of the chatbot. So if the respondent responds yes to a question, for example, do you think there is intergenerational conflict? This is one interaction, one word, and 3 characters. You can imagine that conveying the same information in an open text field will need much more words and characters than just yes. So it's against this background. Compared to open text fields, the chatbots significantly boost the amount of feedback. Adding a voice and tonality to the chatbot slightly increases the amount of feedback, but the effect is rather small. Even if we take into account the frequent repetitions of our chatbot, which add to the amount of characters and words, you can see this on the next slides, the effect is very clear. What's more important here is we can see a clear difference between experienced users and inexperienced users. For example, the respondents who haven't used the chatbot before and those that have. Those who are more experienced with messaging and chatting with either bots or humans define the experience as more positive than those who are light users or were experiencing a chatbot for the first time. This sheds light on 2 things and has 2 implications. Firstly is the usage of chatbots. Since many of our panelists, about 80%, had actually never used the chatbot before, the overall acceptance of this kind of tool is likely to increase as they become more mainstream. And media skills is the second. Even though we aimed to make the interaction with the computer more natural, it still requires some skills to chat with it. And you have to start feeling, well, you will start feeling more comfortable the more experience you have. But we also analysed personality traits of our respondents following the Big 5 model. We especially looked at introversion and extroversion, which are interpersonal personality traits. So our hypothesis was that this interpersonal predisposition of our respondents might affect the way that they experience the interaction with the chatbot. Indeed, it turns out that extroversion boosts the user experience. To be precise, there might be a confounding effect. The extroverted people are generally more positive in their responses and less considered at the moment. We're still working on a lot of this data. So there is more data from the chatbot survey. I have 15 minutes today, so I have cut it down. We looked into personalizing the responses from the bot based on the respondent personality, and we can share if there is some interest. However, I think the chatbots are just a stepping stone to the next methodology. From a personal point of view, I think the future of data collection is unknown. I've been doing this 10 years, but if you asked people 20 years ago what they thought things would look like, they would never have imagined the smartphone. The prediction would be very different. Yeah, people used to stand on the street corner with clipboards and pens and paper, and they still do, but things have changed a lot. So I'm going to take a stab and tell you what the future of data collection will look like and where this technology will go. So my vision of the future is where bots and artificial intelligence meet virtual reality. Already with the Oculus Rift, I don't know if any of you have one of those, it's an amazing piece of technology. You can visit strange new worlds, play games and shop. We could do virtual shelf tests. We could do pack testing without having to make up actual packages, usability testing without the need for central locations. You could be interviewed by a neutral or a friendly robot or a brand mascot. The possibilities really are endless here. And will add a note, I think this version of my reality does create a skills gap in our industry, as this is a whole other kind of programming that we as an industry are not used to yet. So at the start, I mentioned Norstat is all about respondents. Lucky for us, 40% think that taking a survey in virtual reality would be an amazing experience. The issue with virtual reality, as with any emerging technology, is that it's not widespread. And at present, most people don't know what they would use it for if they had one. If you ask them what they think virtual reality will be used for in future, most think it will remain predominantly video games and augmented reality. As with Henry Ford and faster horses, I think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what VR could do for us one day. So this is my vision for the future. I think once we combine the technology available for speech recognition, things like Alexa and Siri, naming new technologies now, Alexa and Siri, and the text analysis, once that starts to get better, so we can start to adjust responses based on tone or personality, we will move to a whole other level of interaction. Eventually, we could have a bot so good, set within a virtual reality space, that the respondent may not be able to tell if it is human or a robot on the other side of the virtual goggles. I'm not sure if I'm amazed or terrified by this idea. This is a point of contention internally as to whether or not a robot would be able to lead an unstructured interview and not have the respondent realize that they're not interacting with a bot or an AI piece of technology. But given the stride that AI is taking, and having seen the terrifying running, jumping, somersaulting robot recently, I think the world's our oyster. I think it's going to surprise us. So before bots take over the world, though, and does all our interviewers out of a job, we have to work on making our own little chatbot a little bit smarter. And that's it from me today. Thank you.